Hey everybody, Greg Pruitt here, and I am joined today by Representative Priscilla Giddings. How are you?
I'm doing good. Thanks, Greg.
Good. So before we get into the office that you're running for and kind of your plans and your visions for what you want to do, can you give people, I guess, a little bit of background for those who don't know you on your family and kind of what you do for work and the career and all that kind of stuff?
Sure. I was raised in a Christian family. I was the baby of 5. My mom was a teacher and a principal. My dad was in law enforcement and just retired last January after 50 years in law enforcement as Idaho County Sheriff. And I grew up in Idaho for the most part. Graduated high school from Riggins High School and then went off to Air Force Academy. Went off to pilot training, got to fly A-10s and MC-12s, had to travel more than 30 countries across the world. And while I was flying combat missions in Afghanistan, I saw how we were losing our soldiers. They were dying in the fight for freedom for Afghanis, for them to have the rule of law, for them to have fair elections. And meanwhile, I'd call home and I'd hear about things that were happening in Idaho that were taking away our very own freedoms right here in my home state. So I really felt called to get involved in politics and to fight for freedom locally. So I was able to transition off of active duty into the Air National Guard down in Boise and then into the Air Force Reserves. And I got elected back in 2016. And just following that, I met my husband, Matt, and he was raised in southern Idaho, a 4th-generation Idahoan and a farmer. And we have 2 beautiful little girls, Hannah and Gwendolyn. Hannah's 3, Gwendolyn's 2. So been in the legislature for the last 5 years and just been a fighter for conservative values. You know, I have a 97% voting average with the American Conservative Union, and I believe in what we're fighting for.
Okay, so you're going from the legislature, and I like to ask this question of candidates, especially for those going for a statewide office. You know, what kind of made you want to jump from being a legislator to lieutenant governor? You know, the current lieutenant governor is going to be challenging Governor Little, and among some other candidates. And so currently it's just 2 of you trying to become the next lieutenant governor for the Republican nomination. So what, you know, in discussions with your family and everything else, and, you know, what kind of made you want to make that jump?
Yeah, there were several considerations. You know, I really enjoy being a legislator. I enjoy representing my constituents from District 7, so that's Riggins all the way up to Sandpoint, very rural, and I love that lifestyle, love those people. And I almost imagined staying in the legislature as long as I could, you know, and just fighting for people every day. I would have enjoyed that because, you know, my other option would be to be an airline pilot, and I do love flying, but I love serving people more in this capacity. So as we're serving, each year, I started to notice that good legislation that the people wanted was not allowed to go through the legislative process. And, you know, after you are discouraged year after year of being able to really help Idahoans, to help our disabled veterans, to help property owners who are not getting property tax relief, all because the powers that be are not allowing those things to go through the legislative process. That was frustrating for me. And then this last couple of years where we had this COVID situation, it really impacted government at a level I've never seen. To have your constitutional, God-given rights taken away from you, not being able to go to church, having your business shut down, being forced to take a shot to be able to have a job or to care for your family, that just really made me realize we are in a fight for freedom right here in Idaho. And Idaho has been a beacon of conservative values for so long, but you start to look at our conservative ratings as a state and with policy, and we're declining rapidly. Our dependency on the federal government is skyrocketing. And then to have, you know, our current governor and people in the executive branch just take away people's rights and not enforce our constitutional rights, for me was the final straw. It said, we need courageous leadership in Idaho. I don't want to be jealous of Florida anymore, you know, and we need that courageous leadership in our executive branch right in here in Idaho. And so it was a prayerful consideration. And, my husband said, as much as he wouldn't, doesn't really want to do it, he believes that I can do it and that I'm the only person that can do it and that we need to go all in. And my husband's retired military, I'm military. We understand the fight, and so we're all in.
Okay, interesting. So, as lieutenant governor, you don't, typically speaking, you're not going to be signing the bills, right? That's the job of the governor, unless the governor was gone and there were some bills to sign that he or she would let you sign. So, I guess in talking, you've talked a little bit about the direction of the state and some of the concerns that you had. And what would you try to do, I guess, as lieutenant governor to, let's say Governor Little wins re-election. Him and the current lieutenant governor, Janice McGeehan, have kind of butted heads a number of times over some issues. How would you be able to either work, or how would you try to influence the governor on positions that maybe you disagree with him on?
I would absolutely work with whoever is elected as governor. If they win the votes and they are the governor, then I'm going to work with them. As a military officer, I've learned leadership and how to work with people from other nations around the world, other militaries. And so, whoever the elected governor is, I plan to work with them and be included. And I hope that when elected, that I would be respected also as an elected member of the executive branch. And you're right, I say the role of lieutenant governor is dual-hatted. Primarily you're the presiding officer over the Senate, and you do get to vote in the case of a tie. And so this last year there was a vote where the lieutenant governor got to weigh in, but you kind of have a policy bully pulpit. You have statewide support and you're hearing from the constituents. And so if you have your ear to the ground, you have the opportunity to really help push some policy perspectives. And in my case, it would be very, conservative values and the things that I'm hearing from constituents on, right? But also your role in the executive branch, just like you mentioned, you are one heartbeat away from being the governor, but you have a leadership position in the executive branch. There are hundreds of state boards, agencies, commissions that all report to the executive branch. And so I really think that there's lots of opportunity for the lieutenant governor to be engaged with those agencies and to make sure that you serve as a liaison between those agencies and the people. And so with that, I look forward to the challenge, the opportunity to learn more about state government and how we can really bridge the gap so that the government is serving the people aren't necessarily serving the government.
Okay. So I guess on some of those policy issues, and we've kind of touched on this a little bit on how you can have some influence. Are there certain issues that you would want to focus on? So right now, or last year, I guess I should say, the lieutenant governor did an education task force, which you were also a part of. Is there something similar to that, or that type of issue that you would want to focus on as lieutenant governor? Even though you're not proposing legislation, but maybe you have a task force or a committee some sort of ad hoc committee that you'd put together on some issues like that? Are there issues you think, hey, Idahoans, we got to focus on these two issues, and I'm going to do my best to look at these issues?
Yeah, there's really a handful of issues that are of vital importance right now. I would say the critical race theory in schools is very important. Our education system, very important. This was the first year that our budget as a state, the total amount of money that goes to education, that percentage actually decreased. Even though education gets $4 billion from the fund, the percentage of the total amount is actually starting to decrease. And so we do need to really focus on those issues. We have problems just with buildings and infrastructure. We have classrooms with high technology, huge TV screens in every classroom, but a leaking roof, right? And so we do need to bridge the gap on those funding streams. But other than fighting, the education issue and trying to support our teachers the best that we can, but also fight against critical race theory, the vaccine mandate is really impacting people more than ever right now. We have emergency room surgeons being fired. And we're starting to see these global companies that are more powerful than government, and that is a huge concern. And I think in the role of Lieutenant Governor, you can really bring those problems to the forefront to help Idahoans understand them better. Another concern that I think all Idahoans are feeling the impact of right now is going to be property taxes. And we've had lots of meetings and interim meetings about property tax relief, yet our current leadership refuses to tackle that problem. And we see more focus on reducing income tax rather than helping property tax owners. And that's a real concern. When billion-dollar hospitals are not having to pay any property taxes, but yet our elderly and our disabled veterans are being forced out of their homes because of the skyrocketing property taxes. That is a statewide issue that's really affecting the people, where I think as a Lieutenant Governor, I could help bring all the parties together, discuss those issues, and try to move forward with some good solutions that are going to help property taxpayers.
Okay. Do you have any particular solution that you think would be the best in that issue overall?
Yeah. So property tax is a very complicated issue, and there's not just one fix. It's very much linked to spending and counties and their spending. And this last session, we actually had a really good property tax relief legislation, more than 50 co-sponsors. And in a legislature of only 105 people, I mean, that's almost a majority of people who support that idea. And I signed on. I thought it was a great solution to help with property tax relief. But it wasn't allowed to go through the legislative process. I mean, my opponent usually single-handedly kept it from moving through the process. And so we've got to tackle multiple issues there before there's going to be that perfect solution.
Okay. So you bring up your opponent. Speaker Bedke is the only other candidate running now that Luke Malik has dropped out. And so for now it's a two-person race. What are some of the key differences that you think that voters would be able to look at and go, here's where I am versus here's where my opponent is?
Sure. I think the first biggest difference is our voting record as based from the American Conservative Union. They're a national organization that ranks every state legislator across the United States and everybody in DC for how they're actually voting on bills and whether or not the policy is conservative or not. And over my 5 years of voting, I have a 97% voting average. I mean, I stand up for conservative values, and I don't compromise away our values. My opponent has about a 58% voting average. So that's a really good consolidated summary to really explain, I think, our policy perspective differences. And a lot of those comes down to like critical race theory, where I'm adamantly against it and he's not. The vaccine mandate, grocery tax repeal. I've been fighting to repeal the taxes on groceries, and now that food is at a 40-year high, this is the time to get rid of it. Where my opponent strongly believes in keeping the tax on groceries, even though we're one of only a few states in the nation who has such a high taxation on groceries. Those are some of the big differences, and we could probably talk. My military service is a big difference, and our leadership styles are very different. But yeah, those are kind of a few.
Okay, so is there any other issues that you wanted to bring up before we move on to the next portion of the interview?
I thought of one other huge difference between me and my opponent, and that's going to be who's backing us. I'm the grassroots candidate. We just filed our year-end contributions totals, and I've had more than 2,000 Idahoans donate to my campaign. And my opponent, he's getting donations from global companies and lobby groups, and I'm not getting any donations from lobby groups. And so it really does show who wants to work for the people versus who is holding the position to help these global companies. And I think that's very important for Idahoans to know.
Okay. Oh, you know what? I do know one other issue I want to talk to you about, and I would be remiss if I didn't. So, the Idaho Dispatch recently had a poll conducted through Zoldak Research, which is a firm out of Washington, D.C. And polls are what they are. You know, a lot of people like to look at them. Some people don't like them at all. Whatever the case may be, we thought, hey, you know, as an independent organization, let's see if we can't get some sort of feel maybe for how the field is in Idaho. It could be spot on, it could be way off, you know, at the end of the day. But so we did the poll, and the lieutenant governor's race was kind of interesting because, and even the pollster told us this is a massive amount of undecided voters. So for those that don't know, I think you were like 14 or 15%, and Speaker Bedke was at 30 some odd percent, and then there was 51% that were undecided, which is a lot of people, which was way different than the lieutenant governor's race, or excuse me, the governor's race, which had very few undecided voters. And so, yeah, what was, I mean, you did give us a little paragraph, but what's kind of your reaction, or what's your thoughts, I guess, on the race overall so far, and how you think it's going?
I was actually quite optimistic with the poll results because it showed so many people still undecided, and I think people are, you know, still getting to know both candidates. And I'm out there hitting the pavement. We just kicked off our statewide door knocking campaign this weekend. 20 plus volunteers out. I hit 40 doors in 2 hours and just talking to people across Idaho. And so I want to earn all 50% of those that are still undecided. I want to earn everyone's vote. And so I thought I would appreciate you doing the poll. And you know, polls really help us candidates figure out where we're going to, I guess, carry forward in some of the aspects of our campaign. But I also know there's a lot of Idahoans who don't want to be bugged and don't answer the phone, right? And you know, I foot stomp along the campaign trail the importance of the May 17th election. Now, we have closed primaries in Idaho, and so that means you can only vote in the primary if you're a registered Republican or a registered Democrat. So for those that are part of the Libertarian Party or independent or Constitution or unaffiliated, you cannot vote in that primary unless you ask for that Republican ballot for the unaffiliated. And for the others, you have to actually change your registration before March 11th. So there are so few Idahoans that actually vote in the primary. I expect we'll get about 200,000 voters. Out of 1 million registered voters in Idaho, only about 200,000 will decide this race for lieutenant governor. So just really want to encourage your viewers that please register as a Republican, because we need conservatives to win. And we have Democrats actually organizing and registering as Republicans so that we get the least conservative Republican in the race to win. So it's quite the battle lines have been drawn, and it's quite the head-to-head fight.
Okay. Well, speaking of head-to-head fight, there's, you know, last year there was some controversy, and you kind of found yourself in the midst of that controversy, and you know, Speaker Bedke is now your political opponent, and so there's been some discussion about that. But it all really stems and goes back to a news article that you shared that was not written by you, but you had shared it on your timeline on Facebook, and that article contained the name of an alleged rape victim as well as her image in the thumbnail. And that's ultimately, I guess, from that ended up into an ethics committee hearing, and then ultimately you had gotten stripped of, I believe, one of your committee assignments, right? It wasn't all of them, it was one of them. You know, looking back on all of that, you know, what is your reaction so far, I guess, to the entire, you don't have to go through everything that maybe you feel, but looking back on the overall of this situation, you know, and now being stripped of one of your committee assignments, I don't know that you've had a public statement or whatever to the media, so I wanted to give you the opportunity to kind of react to that situation.
Sure, I've had lots of responses, and you can go on my social media and website and see that response. So yeah, absolutely, I was censured for posting a news article, and that should alarm all Idahoans, because over this last year we have seen people's rights violated, whether you can't go to church or, you know, your business being closed down, the vaccine mandates, and then the censorship. It when you have, I mean, the President of the United States deplatformed, this is a huge problem. And so now here in Idaho, for my opponent to say that I can't share a news article on my social media website, that's very alarming. And this is, I think, a nationwide movement to try to shut up conservatives and to shut us down. We've seen it happen with Marjorie Taylor Greene. We've seen it happen to Laura Reinbold up in Alaska, even down in Arizona, those that are fighting for election integrity. I mean, they are being deplatformed and censored for a lot of that, and that's very concerning to me. But what's worse than all of this is that it was all very much initiated and started by my opponent in the race for lieutenant governor. And so I really think it is immoral to use taxpayer money, which he did. He approved more than $64,000 of your taxpayer money to pay a law firm to try to do a character assassination against me, and that law firm donates to his campaign, which, there's a lot of red flags there, but that's kind of part of the good old boy politics that we are fighting right here in Idaho. So I'm not surprised by all of it. It really was a fabrication of what really happened. I was standing up for due process, which there again is another guarantee that we have in our Constitution. An individual shouldn't be guilty, until proven so. And we're really starting to see this continuum to change. If we just start allowing accusers to have rights, it's an attack on our constitutional form of government, and that's concerning and alarming. So I'm not going to stand back to the political attacks. We just have to lean into it and continue to fight for your free speech and due process and freedom right here in Idaho.
So do you believe that the initial complaint against you, and I think there was a couple dozen legislators, I can't remember exactly, and your opponent was one of them. Do you believe that was initiated? Because I think at the time that that was initiated, that he had not announced, and I don't believe you had announced at that time either, but do you believe that it was still initiated as an effort to attack your candidacy at that time, or do you believe that after you guys both announced and the complaint had already previously been filed, that it was continued as with that in mind?
Sure. So when you file, there's a lot of planning that happens before that. It's not like you just wake up on a Friday morning and file. And because of that, everybody knew that he was going to run for lieutenant governor. And he knew, and his team knew, and a lot of people in my circle knew that I was going to be running for lieutenant governor. So to say that just because the day that I filed happened to be a day after, he filed the ethics complaint against me, I mean, we're just getting into semantics here. It was absolutely a political attack, and he could have and should have recused himself multiple times, and he chose not to. And so it's irrelevant at this point.
Okay. So I guess I want to, and maybe the last question on this is, going back to Representative Aaron Von Ellinger, which is what the criminal case is currently about. Now, at the time, he was not criminally charged. In fact, when the article was released that you had shared, I don't even think the Boise police were doing an investigation anymore. It was a complaint that was moving through the legislature and I think made it up to the AG's office. Is there any part of you that says, and so some of the people would say at the time, this individual, the alleged rape victim, and again, she was not that at the time because nobody really knew what had happened. She wasn't out publicly attacking anybody. She hadn't lawyered up, so to speak, at that time. Is there any part of you that kind of regrets sharing that article? Let's assume that you did everything right and it was just a news article, not a big deal. But is there any part of you that goes, yeah, maybe I should have held off on sharing it because it contained potential information that could hurt her? Or do you believe that, hey, it was a news article, I had every right, it was the right thing to do, even though that information, that picture was in there?
So I guess I feel like there's probably a lot more to the story, and there was a lot of stuff going on. One, she accused a legislator of forced fellatio, right? And so use of the word rape in and of itself is a little bit it's interesting. It's kind of a sticky situation there. And he passed 3 lie detector tests, and she won't take a lie detector test, and the police dropped the whole thing. And so now my opponent, signed the ethics complaint to expel a legislator. So her accusation ended a legislator's career, his paycheck, his entire vision of what his political future. I think he wanted to stay involved in politics for a long time. He was young, 38 years old, right? So to say that she wasn't going after anybody, she just destroyed a man's life. And that's why it's so important that when somebody makes an accusation, that we go through the legal process and not jump outside of the legal process, right? And so that's what this whole ethics investigation did, is that it ignored the legal process where the whole thing had been dropped, and now it brought it into the court of public opinion. And then his side of the story was not allowed to be put out there. The press, when they released it, they did not release his side of the story. The legislature did not release his side of the story, even though it was a public record that he paid thousands of dollars to have generated by a lawyer, right? So there's concern there when a person can make an allegation and destroy somebody else's career and life, all in the court of public opinion, where the media is not covering both sides of the story. If we continue
let me cut you off there, though. But
Yeah.
why not wait until Idaho Dispatch? We do our best to cover both sides of the story. We leave out all the hyperbole. We leave out the descriptions of both sides and just say, hey, here's what this side says, here's what this side says. Why not wait till the Idaho Dispatch releases both sides? If most of the media is not going to do that, we've done our best. And maybe you didn't know that at the time. I don't know, but hey, rather than sharing another news article that's definitely one-sided, why not let the Idaho Dispatch and share that information instead?
So I put out a newsletter to my constituents at the end of every week, and that's all that I was doing, was putting out information to my constituents.
Okay.
And there was a news article that had both sides of the story, and so I put that out to the people. The people decide, they deserve to know both sides of the story. I don't think it's my responsibility to favor your articles over another news outlet, right?
Sure.
So, but we have to go back to the principle of due process. Like, we can't just start making decisions based on accusations, because there's been a lot of accusations in this building that have never had an ethics complaint initiated on them. And so it turns very political and very nasty, unfortunately. And it was all initiated by my opponent. I think a good leader would have the situation much differently, and it would have protected the young woman's identity, and it could have been resolved in a better way, other than just throwing it to the media and turning it into a public discussion.
Okay. All right. So the last thing that we do with candidates is give you an opportunity to give your campaign pitch. So you look at the camera and talk to the people of Idaho. So do your campaign pitch, and then you can fundraising pitch, whatever you want to do on your website, all that good stuff, and we'll be good.
Sure. So as you've seen, I'm Priscilla Giddings, and I want to be your next lieutenant governor. We need Idaho to be a strong, conservative bastion of freedom. We shouldn't be jealous of Florida anymore. And I'm a fighter, I'm a warrior, and I'm going to stand up for your constitutional rights. I hope that you will consider donating to the campaign. You can donate online at giddingsforidaho.com. You can find my website and my social media site, lots of information. I put out newsletters every week. We're about to kick off the legislative session. And so if you don't receive my newsletters, please shoot me an email and I will add you to my newsletter list. And we're just 4 months out from the most important election in the history of Idaho. And so please register to be a Republican, and you can sign up and volunteer to help my campaign. We kicked off our door knocking campaign this weekend. We're hitting all of our fundraising goals. please help us fight for liberty. And my campaign slogan, and I ask everybody, it's help me and let's let freedom fly across Idaho. So thank you, Greg, and have a good one.
Thank you for your time.
Yeah.
You too.